Welcome or welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Jess and I read a lot so that I don't have to deal with real life. Nice to meet you. It is the 1st of March, so it only seemed fitting that I used today to film my February reading wrap-up. I read 19 books in February. Half term was in the middle of the month, so I had a week off work. My son was at his dad's for a couple of days and I filmed a reading vlog, so I dedicated a couple of days to solely just reading. But until I did that reading vlog, I didn't think I was going to complete my TBR for February. Genuinely thought it was going to be like the first month that I wasn't going to achieve it. And then that reading vlog just cleared whatever fog was going on in my brain, and I have sped through the rest of the month, and it's been incredible. It's been a bit of an up and down month in terms of ratings, but we'll get into that. So get comfy, get yourself a drink. Let's proceed. So for starters, this was my TBR for February. So there was a couple of sort of compulsory reads I had to do for a book club and a travelling book club. There was also the TBRs I picked out using the prompts last month. And then there were a couple of Goodreads challenges that I wanted to tick off. So all in all, I think I had about 11 books on my TBR. It was a lot lengthier than I meant it to be, and I don't think I'm going to do it like that again. I think I'm going to try and keep it quite short, and then everything else is a bit of a bonus. But the first book that I started off with in February wasn't actually on my TBR, which probably didn't help my cause somewhat. But I read Morning Star by Pierce Brown. This is the third book in the first Red Rising arc. So it's the culmination of Red Rising and Golden Sun. I obviously can't go too much into it because it's a sequel, but I don't know what to do about this series apart from make noises. I'm obsessed. One of the greatest things I've ever read. It is just this dystopian sci-fi fever dream of wonderfulness. I would walk on hot coals and broken glass for Severo. That boy needs to be protected at all costs. I love him so, so much. I went into Morningstar wondering how the story was going to progress for there then to be a second arc. And in my head, I was like, right, is this about to go drastically downhill? Because are we then into like a money grabbing situation? I haven't started the second arc yet, so that may still be a viewpoint as I get into that series. But it was stunning. It was beautiful. 5 stars, no notes. The entire trilogy, I've rated 5 stars for every one, which feels like a rarity. I don't feel like I would rate an entire series 5 stars. I feel like I might go, well, this is an overall 5-star series because I like the world or whatever's going on. But for every book to hit 5 stars, I don't think I'm ever not going to be thinking about that series. Just, cannot wait to go into the second arc. I wanted to give myself a little bit of a break so that I didn't oversaturate myself with that universe, but I don't know which other adjectives to use. I'm trying really hard not to say that everything is stunning, because I do use that word a lot, and I know I do, but just, if you haven't picked up Red Rising, please go read it. I completely get that you might feel like it's out of your comfort zone. I get that if you're maybe a romantasy reader, you're quite against reading books written by men, because I used to be like that. I used to actively avoid books written by men because in my head, I thought, well, they're going to butcher everything. No, this trilogy has got one of the most beautiful, overriding love stories. It has got relationships that, frankly, I didn't know men were capable of talking about. It talks about mental health from a men's viewpoint, especially a man in a very patriarchal, I never know if I'm saying that word correctly, world. And it's beautifully done. The taglines in the first 2 books talk about it being Hunger Games-esque, and it kind of is, in like the loosest possible sense. I sort of get it. But to me, the entire series is a lot more reminiscent of Lord of the Flies, which I loved when I was in school and I had to read it. That to me is the basis of Red Rising, and then it expands from there. But 5 stars for Morningstar. Just could not get enough. My jaw was on the floor for most of that book. I was like audibly reacting to it. And I think at one point I threw my Kindle across the room because I was actually scared about what was going to happen. And I was like, I might just DNF this book because I'm not comfortable with where this is going. Because I was so invested in it. 5 stars, easy, done. The first book from my prompts that I read was Circus Creeps by Aidan Pierce. This is a very smutty, dark romance, like dark paranormal romance, I guess you could go with. It follows Meg, who is a half mortal, half succubus, who is trying to reconnect with her succubus side because she thought about it or introduced to it as she was growing up with her mortal father. She then ends up going to a carnival that her mother was part of before she disappeared and is trying to get some answers about her background, about her heritage, about who she is. That is where that book stops being serious. I rated it 3 stars because it was a smutty, spicy good time, but there were parts of it that I definitely did not enjoy. There are a couple of tropes that are introduced quite quickly that have no oomph. There's no solidity to them. So it felt like they were put in there just so that they could tick off a box and say, yeah, this trope's in there. And it's a trope that I love usually. I'm a big fan of that trope. But it was almost like it was in there to lend legitimacy to the book. And in reality, this book would have been a lot more enjoyable, in my opinion, if it was just a smutty good time. It didn't need to try and force like a serious plot point within it. Could have just been girl goes to carnival, girl gets railed by multiple demons. And a good time was had by all. But instead it tried to make it a little bit more of a, she's finding herself. And I wasn't here for it. There is a sequel. I will not be reading it. I am not interested. Like I said, it is a smutty good time. So if you like that, then go for it. It's a little bit monster romancy. If what you are into is that kind of dark erotica, horror, demons type book, then I can see why people would enjoy it so much. I went into it wanting more of a palate cleanser type book than this book's going to be my new favourite read. I just wanted a good time. And it kept trying to distract me from the good time by making things happen in the background. But 3 stars overall. Good time had by all. I then read the Drowning Empire trilogy by Andrea Stewart. This series has confused me so much. Everything about this series, I want to say, is a 5-star series. I want to put this series as like a god tier. I want to reread this every year. I love the world. I love the magic system. Obsessed with the magic system. Think the magic system is excellent. The first book, The Bone Shard Daughter, if you have ever seen in bookshops or you have it on your shelf and you are too scared to read Priory of the Orange Tree, read The Bone Shard Daughter. The stories are completely different, but the vibes of the writing are very, very similar. And Priory of the Orange Tree was my favourite book of last year. It's one of my favourite books of all time, I think. And The Bone Shard Daughter, there's something about Andrea Stewart's writing that was, I was going to say a simplified version, but then that's really insulting to Andrea, and that's not what I mean. It was a more palatable version of Samantha Shannon's writing. So if that kind of very visually epic fantasy isn't quite what you're feeling at the moment, but you want to gear up towards there, then I highly recommend The Bone Shard Daughter. But ultimately, I should probably tell you what the book's about, shouldn't I? So the book follows Lynn, who is the heir to the Empire, and her father is a disliked emperor. He won't formally announce Lynn to be his heir, and Lynn is in competition with a foster child of the court. There is a magic system in this book called Bone Shard Magic, where essentially the citizens of the Empire at a certain age donate a little bit of bone to the Emperor, and the Emperor can then use this to make what they call constructs, which are essentially Frankenstein's monsters. They are animals of various bits and pieces put together, filled with these bone shards. They then are animated and they are used for admin within the Empire. They're used as trade. They are used as war generals. And ultimately, the Emperor has become a bit too reliant on these constructs, and it is causing massive unrest within the Empire. So the story follows Lyn and how she is on this journey to take her rightful place as the emperor of this empire. Like I said, the magic system within this series was wonderful, so well done. It was so interesting, and just I hadn't read anything like it before. The characters, for the most part, I really like all of them. I really like Lyn. I really like that she at no point changes who she is. She grows as a character, but she starts off and she's almost this forgotten child, and she is, rebellious. She's creeping out the palace, she's clambering over roofs and all this. And throughout the series, she keeps that version of herself. I feel like quite a lot of the time in fantasies, there will always be this moment where the really strong FMC will become a little bit of a wet wipe and rely on somebody else. Everything is on Lyn's shoulders. Lyn is doing all of this herself. There is a beautiful slow burn within these books. Like, when I say slow burn, nothing happens till we're like past the halfway point of book 2. It's wonderful. But something has held me back from saying this is a 5-star series. So I rated book 1 4 stars, which is The Bone Shard Daughter. I rated book 2, which is The Bone Shard Emperor, 4.5 stars, and it was so close to being a 5-star, that one. And then the third book, 4 stars, and at some points that was going down to like a 3.5. The final book, the pacing is a little bit off, and there are time jumps within this book. It's quite a clever way of writing this book because it spans a number of years. So these time jumps obviously allow things to happen in the background that you don't need to go into full detail about, but you can then just jump into it. And for the most part, these time jumps work. There are occasions where you're a bit like, well, no, I needed to know what's just happened in that bit of time. There are multiple POVs, which I really enjoy. I know a lot of people are like, more than 2 POVs, I'm not interested. I like a multi-POV book. I think this series should have been more than a trilogy. For it to be as good as I think it could have been, I think it should have maybe been 4 or 5 books, each book being shorter but being able to get to the point a little bit more. There would be things that would happen and I would be so invested, and then we'd get like 50 pages of what is going on here? And then there'd be another reveal at the end of those 50 pages that'd make it completely worth it. But it's only worth it in hindsight. It's not worth it as you're in it. So it just wasn't as enjoyable as I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be a 5-star series. Like I said, the overall world had so much potential, but each book just didn't quite deliver. So I would recommend this series. Honestly, I think it is a very, very good time. There are animal side characters who I can only see as Atreyu from the Neverending Story. Mephi is honestly one of the funniest things I've ever encountered. He's so sassy and so sarcastic and just wants to eat. It's the only thing Mephi's really there for. Andrea Stewart has got a new book that's out though, or is due to come out soon. So I do think I would give her writing another go because, like I said, it was so reminiscent of Samantha Shannon at the very start, and I think this was a debut trilogy. I would enjoy seeing how she progresses and what happens to her writing. And then next up, I started my Cassie Clare journey. So I read City of Bones, which is the first book in the Immortal Instruments series. I loved this. I was 14, discovering like sort of YA fantasy for the first time. Just ate it up. Absolutely loved it. Cannot wait to continue with this series. It was wonderful. It was an excellent experience all round. I loved the fact that the characters weren't annoying, because I think it is so easy in a YA book to make the FMC infuriating. And she wasn't. I really liked her. The way that you are kept included as things are happening in this book, but yet at the same time, there are so many surprises and plot points happening. Just, it's so well done. Cassandra Clare's writing is so good. It is not a YA because it's dumbed down. I mean, it was a quick read because it is a YA book. They're supposed to be, at least, as a 38-year-old. But I didn't read it feeling like I was reading a children's book. It was really well paced. The plot reveals within it made me so excited to carry on with the rest of the series. I rated it 4 stars overall. The only thing I would say, there is a plot point that happens within this book that when I read it, I instantly went, oh, that bad guy's a really evil bad guy for making these people think this, and then it's all going to get resolved in book 2. Apparently not. Apparently that plot point is the actual plot point. And I don't quite know how I feel about that. If you've read it, you'll know what I mean. If you haven't read it, don't let it put you off reading it. Such a good series, and I'm definitely continuing on with the Mortal Instruments as soon as I can this month, because I can just see why people get so invested in this series. I can't wait. One of the Goodread challenges was for Black History Month, and I read or listened on audio to The House of Hidden Meanings by RuPaul. I rated this 3 stars, which felt a bit weird to me because I don't really like rating memoirs, but I had to put it as something. It wasn't what I was expecting. And I love doing the audio when I do memoirs because I think it's so much better hearing these people say it in their own voices. What I will say is this book goes from RuPaul's birth and then ends way before, in my mind, he became such a popular public figure. And I would have loved it if it had carried on, or we'd have learned something about how RuPaul's Drag Race happened. It wasn't his start, he was big before that in the scene. But I feel like RuPaul's Drag Race is what the majority of people know him from. I would have loved to hear how that happened and what that affected in his life and sort of so on. There is also so many mentions of cars. Like, I didn't realise that he was such a petrol head. But every time a car is mentioned, you don't just get, oh, and then we drove to XYZ. You get, we drove to XYZ in this car from this year of this colour, these modifications made to it. And I don't need to know all that. That's not really why I'm reading a RuPaul autobiography. There were certain things told within this book that I don't think put RuPaul in the best light. And I get a memoir is supposed to be completely, you're laid bare. You shouldn't be making yourself out to be better than maybe your actions were at that point in time. But then I also don't feel like they're acknowledged within this book. There's a couple of instances where RuPaul talks about things that he did, and I'm a bit like, no, let's rewind 15 seconds and can we talk about that a little bit more, because I feel like there's some stuff to unpack. It felt like quite a few things were put into this book for a shock commercial factor and just weren't really delved into. Certain things to do with like substance use, but the whole way through it kind of seems like it's one rule for Ru and one rule for anyone that's around him. And again, that is fine. This is his life. This is how he has interpreted his life, which he does talk about at the very start, that everything is kind of from his recollections. But I think I was expecting it to be a little bit more self-aware and maybe a little bit more self-critiquing. To me, it felt like he concentrated a lot on periods of time where nothing happened, but yet we would have 10 chapters and then not focus on the bits where, well, actually, it's kind of what I want to know about. It was almost as though that's the word I'm looking for. It almost sensationalized things that weren't sensational. Sort of his childhood. Yes, there were certain things that happened and certain things that he's probably had to unpack over the years. But it was almost just trying to make a big drama out of quite standard things that happen in a lot of people's lives. And I would have just, like I said, preferred maybe a bit more introspection on RuPaul in his 20s and 30s when there was actually quite big life changes happening for him. But it was 3 stars. It was interesting. I do like a memoir on audio. I think this month I'm going to do Dolly Parton's, because that takes another Goodreads challenge, and I'm very excited for that because who doesn't love Dolly? I then decided to read another of the Goodreads challenges, and I went for The Martian by Andy Weir. I loved this. It was so good. And in my head, right, I love sci-fi shows. I'm a massive Star Trek fan. I've grown up watching every one of the Star Trek series. I have a signed photo of Michael Dorn, who plays Worf, upstairs in my bedroom because I love him. I loved like Farscape and Stargate as I was growing up. But in my head, I watched sci-fi, but I read fantasy. That's kind of how I've always differentiated it in my head. I don't know why I've been doing that because The Martian was so, so good. I am absolutely continuing on with Andy Weir's other books, like Project Hail Mary. It follows an astronaut called Mark who was on a mission to Mars and ultimately stranded there by his team. And it follows his life as he tries to survive on Mars and the rescue mission that is attempted for him. The writing is so dry. It is so, so funny. I loved the fact that throughout this entire shit show of him being stranded on Mars, Mark does not lose his personality. He is funny. He is so sarcastic and so dry, and it was so entertaining to read. I rated it 3.5, which probably sounds like it counteracts everything I've just said. It was a 4-star read the entire way through. The ending annoyed me. And it annoyed me because it didn't do what I wanted it to do. So someone else could read this and not have an issue at all. I wanted something that I didn't get from the ending, and I put it down to 3.5 stars. But I loved the writing. I loved the story that was told. I loved how scientific it was. I didn't understand half of it, but I loved that it was fully told in like log entries. I mean, if I needed to now, I could go grow potatoes on Mars. Don't know why I need to do that, but I could do because the full information about how to do so is in this book. It was just so well done, and I mean, could have been complete lies, but I think quite well researched. It just made it more enjoyable. We then had an arc that I got to read, which was How Not to Raise the Dead by Rachel Chadwick. Anyone that knows me knows how much I love Rachel Chadwick. This is her 4th book that's come out, and I've arc read 2 of them, and they have all been 4 or 5-star reads. I love her. If you don't follow her on social media, please go follow her on TikTok and Instagram because she is so, so funny. She's so northern, and it just makes her 10 times funnier than anyone else. I know I'm biased, but she is hilarious. If we go as an overall genre, she writes dark romance, but every book that she has put out has kind of been a different subgenre of dark romance. So her first book, Bone Deep, is a dark psychological romance that has so many trigger warnings and is not for the faint-hearted, but is just this beautiful story of grief and people's coping mechanisms. And it is also very twisted and very dark. Burn Me Gently is more of your standard contemporary dark romance. There's a stalker, there's organised crime, and it's got some excellent sort of spicy scenes. Then you've got Crawl to Me, which is, in Rachel's own words, all spice, no plot. It is a very short novella. It is a good, good time. And then you have her latest release. How Not to Raise the Dead follows Eden, who has recently lost her partner, and she's struggling with the grieving process. And as part of it, she tries to summon him from the afterlife, but in doing so, she doesn't get her boyfriend back. She gets Malachi, who is a 6'5" demon who enjoys wearing a slutty little crop top. It's good times. It is a paranormal dark romance. And the one thing I will always say about Rachel's books is her writing is so good that she is able to write these very, very different kinds of books, even if they've got an overall umbrella sort of genre that they fall into. This book was so funny. It's so well written. It has dark themes within it, but it addresses them so well with so much care that they fit into the book. They don't feel like forced plot points. They don't feel like anything's being undermined by the sort of humour and the spice that's going on around it. It is the first book in what is going to be a series of, I think, interconnected standalones. And I rated it 4.5 stars because to me, Rachel Chadwick can do no wrong. I eat everything that she writes up. I ingest it so quickly. And I highly, highly recommend that you go and check out her stuff. Her books are all on KU. And I think even if dark romance isn't your usual thing, her writing is so well done that I feel like it would bring people over to that genre, because it is definitely different than the usual, oh, this is a bad guy, he's got a gun type thing that I think is quite prevalent in dark romance, which half the time is the reason I don't really enjoy it. But the plot is good enough and the writing is good enough that I love her. She's great. Go check her out. My next read was The Will of the Many by James Islington. I keep hearing it different ways and I'm not sure which way it's supposed to be. But this book, oh my god. So I read the first 40% of this book over a couple of days and I was enjoying it. I was having a wonderfully good time. It was very enjoyable, but I wasn't like, this is God tier, this is 5 stars. I was like, this is a good read. I hit the 40% mark and then I don't know what happened, but I read 60% of this book in one day. It is a masterpiece. It is incredible. If you have read Red Rising, it gave me sort of similar vibes to that. Weirdly, the magic system also reminds me a lot of what is in the Bone Shard Daughter in terms of what they are taking from citizens in order to sort of power this magic is draining the citizens and killing them. The Roman aspect of how this civilization is set up, I loved. It was brilliant. The characters are so fleshed out. This is so well written that it flows so well. And there are things that happen in this book that you're not going to see coming. Like, this was another one that I was like screaming, crying, throwing up, just in shock at some of the stuff that happens within it. I cannot wait to read The Strength of the Few, which is book 2 in it. But then book 3, I don't think is going to be out until next year. But it follows Viz, who is an orphan within the Catalan Republic. He's then adopted by a powerful couple and he is dragged into this mystery of trying to solve a murder, trying to find this ancient weapon, and he has to do all this whilst going undercover at an academy. He is dragged into this against his will. He doesn't want to be there, but the problem is that Viz is a secret identity, and if he doesn't adhere to these things that he's being asked to do, then people are going to out his true identity, and he's not going to survive that. He would be essentially an enemy of the state, and there are so many things covered within this book. It covers grief really well, it covers betrayal, it covers found family, it covers, just having to trust your gut or being so used to being the only person that you can rely on and then having to learn to rely on the people around you and realising who true friends are and realising that not everyone's out to get you. It was stunning and I need to learn other words but it was stunning. I can't help it. The writing is just incredible. And again, it gives an insight kind of into the male psyche that even a year ago I didn't expect to get from men's writing. And that's probably quite unfair of me. But I was very much like if it's written by a man, for the most part, it's going to have some sort of unrealistic expectation of women within it. And I think that this book and Red Rising, both, way to describe it, you know how the Bechdel test is whether two women in a show or a book can have a conversation that entirely doesn't centre around men? Whatever the male version of that doesn't make sense. But the women that are written into these books are not just written there for the men. The women that are written into these books are so strong and so capable. And I just think that is such a good turn in kind of literature and fiction. And I admit I don't have a huge back catalogue of knowledge to come from, but I'm thinking of things like Game of Thrones that I read when I was younger. And, as sort of enjoyable of a character as Arya is, as Sansa is, you've got Arya who isn't a male focus, but then Sansa is. And I don't quite know what I'm saying here, but what I'm saying is the women have a purpose in these books, and I just think that is a very good situation to be in. It's a very good scenario to read about. It's a really good book. Go read it. I then went back to dark romance and I read / devoured Killswitch. I then read Conclave, which is the novella after this. I then read Nightfall and I read Fire Night, which is the novella that rounds off the Devil's Night series. I had a weird relationship with this series because I read Corrupt and enjoyed the story but hated characters. Michael and Rika can get in the bin. Not even so much Rika, because Rika like gets a lot better by the time we're on these books. Michael can shove off. Hated him. Could not stand him. Then read Hideaway, and I love Kyan Banks. And then I read Killswitch, which is Damon's book. And I heard so many people say that this was their favourite, and I was like, oh, don't really know how that's gonna work. Oh, I see that. And then Nightfall. I did not expect to love Will so much. Like, he was always a bit of a nothing character, and then this, I love him. That is all I had to say, is I love Will. Just, oh. I rate, if we do the ratings and then I can get into the books. I rated Killswitch 4.5, I rated Conclave 4, I rated Nightfall 5 stars, and I rated Fire Night 3 stars. So Killswitch is Damon and Winter's story. As with all of Penelope Douglas's books, they are dark. There is a list of trigger warnings as long as your arm. Go check them out before you read it. But they are heartbreaking. Things that Damon has gone through, and at no point does it excuse anything he's done because he's not a very nice person for the most part. But his story is so tragic and he has had no experience of being loved the right way, and therefore he can't love people the right way. And you just want to go back in time and talk to that little boy that sat crying in the fountain and kind of go, there is a better way than all of this. There is better things out there for you. It was just stunning. I'm saying it again, can't help it, I'm sorry. It was so, so good. The themes that it addresses are done so well in Penelope Douglas's books. And so far, I have only read Devil's Night, but I think the things that she addresses are talked about quite well. I really like Damon as a character. Winter is a bit here or there. There are a few things that are a little bit unrealistic. Like, she's blind, but he's buying her a motorbike. That feels like a recipe for disaster. If I am wrong in that assumption, then please tell me and I'm willing to be educated, but kind of doesn't feel like that's going to end too well. But overall, just the growth that Damon has is fantastic. His relationship with Rika then makes me like Rika more. They have got a really good relationship and she sees Damon for what he can be and not for what he has been. And I think that's a really kind of beautiful plot point that is within these books. Conclave then falls in between the events of Killswitch and Nightfall. And it's just a fun little novella. It's incredibly spicy. It sets up the events of Nightfall really well and it puts context into quite a few things. It is a good novella. It's a novella that definitely has a place, I think. So I enjoyed that one. Nightfall, 5 stars. I cried so much. I read it in a day and it's like 752 pages and I read it in a day because I couldn't put it down. Will's story is heartbreaking. Like, he is a prime example of just because everything looks okay on the outside doesn't mean everything is okay. And I also think that Will's story is such a good representation of you can have everything that everyone else wants. You can have the happy childhood, you can have the loving parents, you can have everything handed to you on a silver platter. But depression isn't necessarily a physical representation of what you have and what you don't have. It is a chemical imbalance in your brain. And I think that Nightfall was a very, very good representation of this because compared to the other 3 stories, Will should have been all right. Will's had a good time. Will's had an easy run. But because on the face of it, he has had the easy run, he has then never really been able to address what's going on inside himself because he is the sunshine to everyone else. He is the one that makes everyone else feel better. He's the one that's kind of keeping Damon together as he's going through all his stuff. And I think that Nightfall was a really good story about how it's not as simple as that and you don't always know what's happening behind closed doors. And ultimately, I would crawl over broken glass and hot coals for Will. Just, he's wonderful and needs to be treasured. There is then the novella Fire Night, which doesn't need to exist. Get in the bin. I gave it 3 stars. In fact, I just double checked. I 2.5'd it because it was absolutely mid. It was fine. It didn't need to exist. Didn't really see the purpose of it. Didn't really like what it did with the characters. Didn't really like the kind of second generation of characters it introduced. But it existed. I then read God of Wrath and Lies by K.M. Moronova for my travelling book club. So read it, annotated it. So all the yellow ones were Jazz, all the kind of purpley ones are me. There is more than it kind of looks, but you can't really see them in the light. I'm going to keep this one quite short. I rated it 1 star. I hated it. If I could have DNF'd this book, I would have done. It was painful. I need somebody that has read K.M. Moranova's other books, so the My Knife, Your Back, or Your Knife, My Back, whatever they're called, to tell me if they're like this one. Because this was horrendous. The FMC was insufferable. I have never disliked an FMC more than I did the one in this book. Her life choices were beyond questionable. They were stupid. She was stupid. The whole thing was stupid. I hated it. If you have read this and you enjoyed the overall story and the kind of culmination of it and how it ended up at the end, go and read Heavenly Bodies by Imani Uru, because the sort of tropes that it brings in at the end of this are done in Heavenly Bodies, and it is done so much better. This was... no. But then read this bit isn't going to be any better. A Veiled Kingdom by Holly Renee. I also 1-starred this one. Another insufferable FMC, but who was worse than the FMC in this one, the MMC. Daka gave me the ick so badly. So badly. He was a walking stereotype of who did that to you and Good Girl. And it was cringy. And like the FMC at one point, well, the whole way through the book, she's like this super sheltered, innocent girl. And I get that that is a trope in a lot of romantasy, that, you know, she's awakened and then is shown a really good time by the 6'5" MMC. But the FMC is like this young, innocent thing. And then the very first time that she's kissed, she then crawls across the floor to the MMC to basically beg for it. No, it was... I hated it so much. And again, it was a book club book of the month, so I couldn't DNF it. If I could have done, I would have done. I didn't like the writing. Everything is so over-explained, and yet nothing is happening. There are trees that are described using like 4 adjectives in a sentence. Absolutely not. We'll not be continuing with that series either. I then read A Rather Vengeful Accord by Danielle Knight, and this book is a dark academia fantasy, and it follows Hal and Alistair, who have gained entry into this elite school for gravers and spirers, and the only way that they can basically attain a place there is if they team up and have this accord. The positive points of this book, I enjoyed the idea of the magic system, sort of the necromancy within it. That was good. I rated it 2.5 stars, but what I will say is I rated this book 2.5 stars purely because it wasn't for me. I can completely see how someone would read this and really enjoy it, but it was that sort of whimsical writing style that I think lends itself a lot to kind of gothic fantasy, and it's almost written... I always want to liken it to like Pride and Prejudice, where it's a bit, no sir, we must not do that, we must do this. And it's not high stakes enough for me. I like a high stakes fantasy. I like a political system. I want a world I can get fully immersed in. There were bits of this world I didn't really get. Sort of there's this kind of imaginary border between 2 lands. One is supposed to be more modern than the other, but then the less modern land has electronics and the more modern land doesn't have electronics, and there were things that I just couldn't quite get my head around. So I can see, if you like a kind of dark academia and you like that gothic-y, whimsical vibe, then I think you'd really enjoy this. It's written really well. It's part of a duology. It wasn't for me. Quick change of scenery for the last two because my son has just got home. But as I was saying, I read Florence Knapp, The Names, and it was just a masterpiece in nature over nurture. The way it tackles the themes of grief, domestic violence, substance abuse, it was beautiful, and I cried, ugly cried. And for a book that's only 300 pages, sort of 330 pages, I think, the connection that you feel to the characters is incredible, especially as someone who is used to reading sort of 500-600 page fantasy books that gives you this time to build a relationship with the characters. To feel that connection in such a short amount of time was really impressive, I think, and it's definitely made it that it was the right decision to branch out of my comfort zone, and I definitely want to do more of that this year. I think I want to read a lot more lit fic and even sort of more fluffy romances, because the final book that I read was Mate by Ali Hazelwood, which I rated 4 stars. I've read Bride and May, and I really like Ali's writing. I think it's really funny. I think it's really witty. I love the FMCs that she writes, and I love the sort of, I hate the word, but the banter between the FMC and the MMC. I just think she does it really well. It's a spicy, fun time. The FMCs are strong. They kind of know who they are. They're just really, really entertaining books. And it's made me realise that I want to go to the fluffier side, maybe more. I want to read a couple of Ali's other sort of contemporary romance books and just continue branching out. But I think we are now at the end of these 19 books. If you have stayed this long, thank you so much for listening. I'd love to hear if you have read any of these books or if any of these are now on your radar to read. If you don't have anything to say, then maybe leave me a comment of a star emoji for Morning Star. Again, thank you so much. I would love it if you could like, subscribe and comment, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.